Welcome back to the On Adventure podcast. I'm Josh Self and I'll be your host. My guest today is Justin Smith. By day, Justin teaches high school in the Santa Cruz, California school system, but it's not just any class. His classroom is basically a bike shop. If you watch the YouTube video, you'll see all the bikes in the background. It's a career tech education classroom with real tools, real bikes, and real kids learning the difference between a Phillips and a flathead screwdriver and what it feels like to fix something with their own hands. But that's his day job. On his own time, Justin's finished the Tour Divide bike race, a 2,700-mile trek from Banff, Canada to the Mexico border over 16 days straight. He's raced the Fiji Eco-Challenge with Team Curl. He's been in the Ironman World Championships in Kona, and he's chased a 60-hour swim run that went across the Swedish archipelago, and he did it 3 times. We get into all of it. The pain cave, the front country versus the back country, the dark hours before the sunrise on day 2 when your body's asking, what exactly are we doing out here? And the answer Justin keeps coming back to, the more you do hard things, the more you realize that hard things are worth doing. This is Justin Smith on Adventure. Justin Smith, welcome to the On Adventure podcast. I know this is going to be a great conversation. You come highly recommended from another great interview with Roy Malone, and he set the bar very high for what I should expect from you. So we'll see what happens.
Well, thanks for having me, Josh. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So anybody that's watching this on YouTube will be able to see behind you. You are in what looks like a bike shop, and I'm sure this plays into part of your story. But why don't you tell me again, because we were just talking about this, but what is the bike shop that you're in right now?
Yeah, very much so. I am a proud educator. I teach high school. We are in our final week right now, literally just 4 days left, so you can kind of taste summer break. The class I teach is a CTE class, that stands for Career Tech Ed. Essentially, students get to choose their electives, and here in Santa Cruz City Schools, that's where I live and teach. My wife teaches here also. They can choose from wood shop, they can choose from digital media, they can choose from, film. We've got auto shop, and then we happen to have a bike shop program. And so that essentially is it's a nonprofit. It was started here in town by a woman who owns a local bike shop, and she was kind of feeling like, hey, I got all these kids that are really interested in bikes and they want to come in and they want to work on bikes, but they don't really know what they're doing. So like, is there a way we can sort of blend this? And so Project Bike Tech's in, I don't know, 20, 30 schools based out of Colorado. And we feel really fortunate to have 2 of the programs here. I teach at both of them. I teach at Harbor High School and Santa Cruz High. So
that's awesome.
I love it.
It looks like you've got 100 bikes behind you.
I've got a few. This is actually my smaller classroom. This one's just a portable, my other classroom. It's kind of fun. We get a bunch of bikes that end up getting donated too. We got project bikes, but we tune them up and pass them on. There's a bicycle collective, Santa Cruz Bike Collective here, that passes on bikes to agencies and kids. And so, trying to give back to the community in one small little way.
That's cool. And you were telling me earlier, it's not just necessarily teaching a kid how to tune a bike up, but there's other life skills that get taught through this program. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, Career Tech Ed, we do everything from creating a portfolio, which includes a resume and a cover letter and interview skills. We do some leadership development stuff. There's a lot of soft skills, but helping them to think beyond the classroom. Of course, using tools is a big one, just identifying the difference between a Phillips and a flathead screwdriver, or, the difference between a cone wrench and a box wrench or something like that. But a lot of it's real world problem solving, figuring it out, building a lot of confidence. A kid looks at something and they're like, this looks so hard. I don't even know what I'm doing. Like, where do I begin? And then you start to unpack it step by step, and they're like, wow, I can do this. And then and maybe kids aren't huge cyclists, but I always tell them, hey, later on, maybe you have a kid and you got a jogging stroller and you get a flat tire in your jogging stroller. Like, you can take it to a bike shop, and I'm all for supporting the local bike shops. We got to keep them in business. But, you could also save yourself a few bucks and buy a tube and put it in.
Yeah.
Skill you learned in high school.
Yeah, one of the first things I got into when I was trying to get back in shape as an adult was doing triathlons. And a buddy gave me a bike. I had no idea, like, I could ride a bike, but I had no idea what to do with it. And getting a flat tire was actually a very scary thing because at I didn't know how to fix that. And
Sure.
so, I think what you're doing, as you're saying, is giving confidence. And kids don't do these kind of things very much anymore either, where you take something apart and you put it back together, and the whole thing is a process in how to use your hands and your mind and problem solve as you're putting it back together. And that seems like an incredible platform to launch kids out of. And so how many years have you been working in this program in Santa Cruz?
Well, the long version is I graduated with a degree in psychology, and then I didn't know where I wanted to go. I was leading canoe trips in Florida, 28-day canoe trips for Outward Bound for adjudicated youth. And I sort of realized, like, I love connecting with kids outside. And so then I got into more experiential ed and backpacking and snowshoeing trips. And then I was teaching at an outdoor school. I met my wife, teaching at a 6th grade science camp. And then I decided, I'm actually ready to go back and get a credential. So I got I got a science credential. So I was teaching middle school science for a while. And then at COVID, we relocated here to Santa Cruz, and I looked on EdJoin, which is kind of the popular site for teachers, and I see this bike tech teacher. I'm thinking, what? This is perfect. Like, it would be like if you, Josh, loved eating waffles and riding horses, and there was like a race that you got to eat as many waffles and ride horses all day long, and you're like, this is my dream. Like, I love this. So yeah, I'm in my 4th year. I took a little hiatus. My daughter was born, and we took off in our van and traveled around the Pacific Northwest for a while. So I took a short little break. But yeah, essentially I'm in my 4th year here. So still figuring it all out, kind of, you got to be fluid, and kids change. But I do feel super fortunate. I love what I do. I love
That's awesome.
The high school. It's a fun age, and yeah, it's pretty cool.
Waffles and horses. That's a combo
Not
I don't think I've ever heard before.
but I love waffles, and so when I think about eating something, that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Right on. Now, are you a California kid? Did you grow up out there?
I grew up in the foothills, about an hour east of Sacramento, a real small town, Jackson, up in the Gold Country, Highway 49. Grew up on 7 acres, running around, building tree houses and digging holes and falling off of rope swings, and then went to community college. I swam and played water polo there, and then I transferred actually to Santa Cruz here. So it's kind of funny now to be in the town where I went to college, because I thought, man, I was here for 2 years. I thought, man, this town's kind of expensive and hard to make it, and then I left and ended up coming back, and then left again, and then met my now wife, and we've gone on a bunch of adventures, and we built a tiny house. We were living in a tiny house, built a tiny house on a TV show, Tiny House Nation, years ago.
Oh, and, on a TV show?
Yeah. I don't know if you've heard of Tiny House Nation. Anyways, it was a blast. We're still in contact with Zach Giffen. He's the kind of the hands-on woodworking guy.
I got to stop you there. How did you get into that?
Man, so this was 2012 or 2013. My wife sees some sort of maybe post at the time. I don't even remember. Technology goes so fast. And it was like, are you interested in alternative housing? And we were like, yeah, actually, we would love to, because we were living out of our van, more or less, traveling from site to site, teaching a group of kids for a week. They show up, and then you're just this naturalist with all this enthusiasm and excitement, and you let them run around and flip over logs and find salamanders, and so we're like, man, wouldn't it be cool if we could own a yurt in the woods, or build a, I don't know, hay bale house or something. And so my wife sends them a message, hey, we're outdoor teachers. We run summertime backpacking programs for kids, and we were interested. And they kind of fired back with a few questions, and they're like, well, this is kind of what we do. You give us a little bit of money, and then we'll sort of assemble a team to design. And they threw in some extra, materials, some siding and flooring and windows and some of the perks that the show got. I think this was season 1 or season 2. So
build it for you, and it's like a big reveal for.
Kind of, yeah. So yeah, it's, you got a week. The team comes out for a week, and they just blitz it. Yeah. So we had a contractor come to the table and we sort of negotiated some stuff with him, and then you just go hard. In the last 3 days, I don't think they would let us show up back on the site kind of after they were putting on the siding and then doing the interior stuff. And then, yeah, there's this big reveal with a bunch of tears, like, and so we lived in that. And the point of the story was my daughter was born. My wife, we ended up putting up a little yurt next to it. We lived in kind of a little like small house trailer type village.
Awesome.
And my wife and I were both teaching, and our daughter was born and brought back to this tiny house. And probably 8 months in, our little one is like climbing the loft ladder, and we turn around and she's 5 feet off the ground, and we're like,
oh
whoa,
my gosh.
this is serious
Not
now.
baby-proof.
And so my mother-in-law is about 40 minutes away now, half an hour away, and she was the one who was like, you should come closer to us. And we're like, Santa Cruz is a great spot. And so here we are. We feel pretty
That's
stoked
awesome.
to be here.
Do you still have the tiny house?
No, so we sold it to a woman who lost her home in the Paradise Fire. Actually, we felt really good about passing it on and letting somebody else get to enjoy it, and we miss it actually a lot. Some days I'm like, gosh, I got all this stuff on the floor. Like this would never happen in the tiny house.
Man, okay. So I forget where I interrupted you. You built a tiny house. Your daughter was born. And it was that when your daughter was born, was that kind of the end of this bouncing around to different programs?
Oh yeah. So at that point, my wife and I had both gotten our teaching credentials, and we're teaching middle school science at the time. And I guess a thread I would like to throw in here is like, there's a theme that's emerging that I'm sure you're picking up on, this kind of just like a bit of a free spirit, but also like this chasing of adventure, which I love that you do such an amazing job with your podcast of teasing this out of people. And I really feel like that's something that I've gravitated towards, and just sort of view my life as this forever adventure that I'm on. And so we went from one kind of adventure, and it was great. We felt liberated. We could leave and travel every summer. We were like, work hard, play hard. We were taking off. You close the doors on the tiny house and you're like, I don't feel bad leaving a little tiny house empty for 6 weeks and going to Thailand or Norway or whatever. And so then we come back and you're like, we're living pretty simply and cheaply. And I really liked having the one, small footprint, but two, you were so intentional. You would go to I'm sure you in your line of work, you go to a conference or some sort of event, and they're giving out these swag bags, and you get a swag bag, and then what do you do with the swag bag? You put stuff in the swag bag. So then by the time you're done, you got this bag, and you're like, in the moment, it felt great to collect all this stuff, but then you got to bring it home with you, and then you're like, I don't, so there was always this like, hey, I live in a tiny house. I don't even like, and then you're like,
it's like a forcing function to make good life decisions.
100%. Yeah.
That's cool.
And it still takes a lot of work. We still try and be very intentional. Our daughter's 7 now. And of course we go to a thrift store and I want this and I want this. And, of course, you're trying as a parent to be like, well, do you have some money in your piggy bank? You could buy one of these. But then it's also like, you've got 50 stuffies now. You really need another stuffy, but your room's only so big. And so we practice this like, oh, you get a handful of shirts from somebody or, some birthday gifts, then we need to pass something else on. But it takes discipline. It really does.
Yeah. So you made a distinction there a minute ago of you don't go on adventures. Living life as an adventure is in your DNA. It sounds like it's in your DNA. And in my mind, somebody that makes that distinction, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, like you got a permission slip for that to be okay at some point. Did you give yourself that permission slip, or was there somebody in your life that said, hey, you don't have to conform into whatever somebody else thinks you need to do with your life?
Oh man, what a deep question here, Josh. We're all in this together. We're all on this journey, just trying to figure it all out. And at the end of the day, I guess I feel like the one thing that actually moves the needle for me is putting myself in really hard situations and doing something that pushes my limits physically, mentally, emotionally. And some days just being in what my wife and I would call the front country, being in civilization, some days I'm like, I'm on that feeling of like, wow, like how do I navigate in this, like, do I need to buy this thing, or do I need to have this, or do I need to like dress a certain way? I mean, with high schoolers all the time, and they make comments, and it's like, what's cool and what's hip, and here I am in my 40s going like, I don't really care what's cool anymore. But so yes and no, I guess in some ways it is a choice, but it's also, as I was saying, it requires that constant like effort and energy to actually restrain sometimes from going like, all right, like there's an easier path and there's a hard way. And I feel like the more I do the hard things, the more I realize the hard things are worth doing.
Yeah, that's I see that a lot in these conversations. It's I don't know if you call it yin and yang, but like you don't get one without the other. The living life on purpose and having the joy and satisfaction of what you're doing comes because you have put yourself into hard things and at times suffered. That and we live in modern day America. Like comfort is what is sold to us, but the more we get that, depression and anxiety and addiction is at historical highs, yet we live in the most comfortable place that's ever existed. So you've tapped into something that I think keeps you pointed in a line that matters to you. And when did that start? Were you a 6-year-old kid that was always looking for something hard to do, or did that start later incrementally?
Boy, that's, I guess I think back to like, I consider myself an athlete. I love to do endure, it's gotten farther and farther and farther. And I think as my wife, the longer we've been together, the more she's like, does it have to be 5 days or 10 days? Like how, like, what about just one day, Like, I think to myself still, like I get on a whatever, out for a run or an exercise, and like an hour or two, it's like, man, I would love to just keep going. But the progression, I was a swimmer in high school.
Okay.
And I remember thinking like I was a sprinter mostly. I went on and swam NC2A. And then from there, I remember actually it was in college, my good buddy and former like coach. He was a couple years older than me growing up. I always looked up to him, and he's like, "Hey, I'm going to do this triathlon, Justin. You want to go try it out?" And I was like, "Oh, sprint." It was Olympic distance triathlon, and I remember finishing that. I like just crushed the swim. I got done. I take off my speed. I wrap the towel around me, take off my Speedo, put on my bike shorts, put on my bike shoes, just got passed on the bike. And then just the run, the wheels were falling off. And I finished that, and I thought, I had the fastest swim of the day and probably the 30th fastest bike and the 100th fastest run. It just went shh. And I thought, that was so hard. I will never do that again. And this is probably what everybody says who comes on this bike. That very next summer, I'm like, "Oh, you want to do it again? I'll sign up. I'll sign up." And then that took me to doing, and even at the time, after probably 30 Olympic distance triathlons, I thought, man, half Ironman just seems like so far. And then, and then the next thing you know, you're out doing an Ironman, and you're like, wow, this is a long ways. And then I transitioned from that into more bike packing, and then started pursuing bike packing adventures. And then that kind of like, has expanded to, I met Roy. Actually, you mentioned him at the start of the podcast. 2019, I was going to Fiji Eco-Challenge. I raced with Team Kirk. I don't know if you've seen it on Amazon Prime, but we make an appearance in there a couple of times. And so that's when I got to meet Roy, and then I kind of got a little taste for the expedition style racing, and have done, a handful of expedition style race. Not as many as Roy. Roy's in the Hall of Fame for a reason. But kind of just figuring out what the next adventure is. The last few years, I've got to go to Sweden and do this event called the One Water Race. You check that out, Josh, if you're into. It's a really niche sport. It's a swim run with a little blend of navigation. Basically, in the United States, we've got all kinds of events, but swim run is not a huge one. It was born really in the Swedish archipelago. So there's I don't know, 20,000 islands off the coast of Stockholm. And essentially they take you from the northernmost island to the southern tip. And you got 60 hours to finish this race. In and out, you're wearing shoes, swimming at night. And then you get to an island,
so
you get off and
out of the water on
island to island. Yeah. And I'm going to be honest, I've gone 3 times and I never finished. No team from the U.S. has finished. Only the Swedes and the Australians, and they are so tough. Big shout out to them. But it's actually one of the largest televised endurance races in the world. It's amazing what they pull off. The race organizer does an awesome job, and so they got people wearing backpacks with all the batteries and stuff, and so that you get to witness the whole thing. And when you talk about what goes through the space between our ears during a deep adventure, you kind of get to see it in the depths.
That's cool. How many people compete in that?
Last year there were 10 teams. There was 2 teams from the U.S. Germany had a mixed team. Australia, a few teams from Sweden mostly, and yeah, there's $100,000 in prize money on the line, and only 2 teams finished last year. So I wish I was saying I was going back. A couple of my teammates are going to go back this year. Good luck to them. But it's a really cool challenge, and there's all kinds of. I mean, you've heard stories from all kinds of people doing really cool adventures out there, all for chasing the same thing.
Right, and so there's obviously an endless amount of organized races around the globe. You just hit many of them. I've got some friends, I think I've interviewed some of these people too, but some friends that are like, I'll never do a race again, but they're making stuff up. They're making up their own backyard ultras.
Sure.
And that's pretty awesome too, because they're doing it for the love of the pursuit. Mm-hmm. And that piece. So this is where my questions are coming to you from, the pursuit of something, because it's probably not the pursuit of suffering or pain. What is it? What have you learned about yourself in pushing past limits that you thought you had before, whether it was longer to short or shorter to longer triathlons or into your multi-day events? What have you learned about yourself?
Well, the biggest thing I would say is we are way tougher than we think we are. And the more we put ourselves in situations that are uncomfortable, the more, we lean into that discomfort, the more comfortable it actually becomes. And then you start to realize when you do show up we win the day, you're like, man, I don't want to get up and go to work. And you're like, oh, this isn't that bad. But yeah, I guess I would say, the human spirit, the fight that's inside of every one of us, the willingness to to be right on the rivet and just constantly questioning yourself really starts to just tease out the why. Why are we doing, the how is the big one. You look at a schematic and you're like, oh my goodness, this is so far. How am I ever going to do 170 miles a day for 16 days straight? Like, I don't know if I could do that. And then you start to realize the why is like, well, because there's a belief inside of us that this is possible, and the feeling that you get each moment you're out there leaning into that, you start to see what you're really made of, and that for better and for worse. It makes me a better dad. I think it makes me a better husband. It makes me show up better in my, with my high school students, a lot more tolerance, a lot more patience. So yeah, I don't know if I can put it on one thing, which I guess is the goal of this podcast, right? Like, really, how do you put words to it? It's tough, but there's that feeling, and we've all had it when we've done something, we've pushed past that moment of like, man, I don't really know, is this worth it? Like, and then you come out the other side of it and you're like, wow, like I did something I didn't know if I can do, and it feels really good.
Yeah, at times it can be really this transcendental experience of almost like out of body. Like, that wasn't me that just did that, but it was. And I think the feeling that's on the other side of that is, I think part of I'm sure it's some chemical balance that strikes when a human being is pushed to a limit, but it's a thing that you want more of. And, I think that probably it has something to do with why we would want to set a limit that's a little bit further than the last one. And let me see if I can go a little bit further. I'm curious, when you get to, so you've done really, really long distance things, more so than the average everyday explorer is what I'm calling them. But the person doing the triathlon or even the ultra marathon, most of those are in one day. You're doing multi-day things. How far do you have to be into something before you hit that dark spot in your mind?
Dude, great question. Well, so one of the big leaps I had was, I finished, I qualified, I went out to Kona, raced Kona, didn't have a great race. It was hot. I was like, wow, this is out of my element. And I think I was dealing with a little like Achilles pain or something. And I remember coming back and thinking like, oh, I just want to run. I want to run really hard. And then I dealt with a little more like plantar. Then it like really aggravated myself. So then I decided, I just looked up, like, my wife and I we toured through South America for 6 months on proper bike tours. We went down the spine of the Andes and had an awesome adventure. Awesome. And we saw a couple people on like, bike packing rigs. And I thought, wow, like you don't have anything with you. And so I was kind of just teasing around like, routes in California. And so I found the Stagecoach 400, and that was my first bike packing rig or bike packing race. So I remember showing up, like the bike I had, the gear I had, it's kind of all like it's on there. And I remember standing at the start line and they're like, oh, dude, you don't need a sleeping bag. This is not a race for a sleeping bag. Like you're going to be done in 50, 60 hours. Like you don't need a bag. And I was like, what do you mean? Like lay down in your bivvy. And then if you're cold, you just wake up and you start riding. Like if you wake up and you're shivering, like just get on your bike and start riding, and I thought, okay. And so I left my sleeping bag. I mean, I probably shouldn't have just yielded some stranger's advice, but yeah. I take off riding, and all day, I'm thinking, wow, like this is a lot. Like you're following a GPX file. My first time, like with like a GPS, sort of figuring out where I'm going, route finding, and so you get to probably like 18, usually like 14, 16, 18 hours in, your body's kind of like, all right, I see what we're doing now. Like we're gonna keep going. And the first night, that first time I didn't push through the first night. I think I laid up at probably 2 a.m, and I remember laying down, and I found a McDonald's, and I opened the back doors to the dumpster, and I pulled out a piece of cardboard, and I kind of laid on this cardboard in my bivvy, and I was already cold and shivering, and I'm thinking, oh man, but I'm like tired. I mean, I'm like really tired. That's the hardest window. I'm sure you've heard this from all kinds of explorers and adventurers, like just before sunrise, that like late. And so I'm kind of, I was already kind of falling asleep on the bike. And so by the next, I slept maybe 90 minutes. And by the next day I got up, and then of course I'm making some nav airs. I'm having to like just double check where I'm at. So I lost a little time, but I ended up riding with a guy, and sure enough, we finished, and I did finish in under that, 50, 52, 54 hours, something like that. And you roll into town and it's pitch black, and there is no like celebration of like, you are an Ironman. It's like you just tip your bike over and like lay down and just fall asleep. But at that point, that for me is about the time when your body starts to like come alive, and you're like, wow, there's more in the tank. Yes, yeah. And that second night for sure. I mean, there's a lot of people that can push 30 to 40 hours with no sleep and hard, like, and then usually by that second night, your sleep strategies coming into play in the expedition sort of racing scene of like, okay, we need to be very strategic. Where are we going to take a 90-minute power? Sometimes it's good to do it in the afternoon when it's warm and you're like, can lay out and get a good sleep. But usually by 48 hours, my body's like, all right, are we going to keep going here, or like how long is this lasting? But again, that's where everything starts to come online, and that's where your senses get a little heightened. You've definitely depleted all your quick burning carbs and your like fueling strategy, hydration strategy, all the things that like an athlete would have to take into consideration to go
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, how much longer am I doing this for? And now I've really got to start paying attention to my feet and my hands and my core temperature. Like, did I get sunburned in the first day? Because like, boy, I did a race, Colorado Trail race. I mean, first day it was scorching and I like sunburned everywhere. And then it's like, then you start getting cold, like your body can't
Yeah.
regulate temperature anymore. So, 5 days of that was like, I mean, you're in the Rockies and you're just shivering in the middle of the sun because your skin is not regulating your temperature anymore. So we've all had those moments, but you learn, you definitely learn like, okay, a
Yeah.
sun shirt, like that's an essential piece of gear.
Yeah. Education is never free. So
That's right.
you gotta figure that out along the way. So,
Yeah.
that's really interesting to me though, that it takes a day or two to get to that point where it's like, okay, the real stuff's online now, and this stuff can go a really long time. There's got to be a moment from zero to that where your mind starts saying, no, no, we're done. This is danger. You got to stop. You're hurting yourself. Like, and some people call it the dark night of the soul or the pain cave. What is that like for you? And what tools or mantras
Yeah.
or techniques do you have to get yourself through it to get to the good stuff?
Wow. Well, yeah, man, you're good at this. I like this. I think it was Courtney Dauwalter, ultra runner. She describes,
Legend.
yeah, the pain cave, and like this idea that we all would fear this going into this place and just being like so like just, oh, I don't want to be here. But instead flipping it as like, if you can't get out of it, get into it, like let's redecorate this place, let's see what this is all about, like let's see the parts that are like really really like. And so for me, you just know that it's gonna hurt. That's why you're there. It's an intentional. Like, I'm here because I'm choosing to be here. I want to be here. I want to see how long I can endure this. And in doing so, it it it's just there's no fighting it, right? It's like it's going to happen. It's going to happen to everybody. You're going to have your high moments where you're just on top of the world. Yeah, I love this. Like, this is the best descent, and then it ends. Or this is the longest climb ever, and then it ends. So like, it's just knowing that you're on this roller coaster, and again, coming back into like our like, our safe little bubble with our family. It's like, my daughter's having a meltdown and you're just like, oh. And then you're like, you know what, this isn't going to last forever. Like, it's the
Mm.
same feeling of like, I can work through these moments when I have these really big feelings, because I grew up going like, positive feelings, feeling happy, that's great, have them all day long. Like, oh, you're uncomfortable with this, like, no, like, just be happy. And so, yeah, the more you kind of have that positive self-talk, and the more you start to realize that like, I'm choosing to be here. I've done the preparation, I've done the work. Sorry, I'll wait for this.
Lunch is now over. Please report to your A3. Lunch is now over. Thank you.
The more you realize that you've done the work, you continue to reaffirm, I've put in the time, I've done maybe the route research, or I've got the appropriate gear, and just building the confidence. So much of it is that mental, like, I've done hard things. Jesus.
Javi Rodriguez to the counseling office. Javi Rodriguez to the counseling office.
The more you do, the more you realize you're capable of doing, and then you can always go back in that Rolodex of like, oh yeah, I've been cold, wet, tired, hungry, and this is what it feels like. And it's not gonna, I'm gonna end up making it through, and I'm gonna be that much more grateful when I get to that meal I've been dreaming of for the last 12
Mm.
hours.
Yeah. Yeah. For our young listeners, a Rolodex is a thing that you would keep information in that you could tap into at some point in the future. So,
That's right.
yeah, that's really good, man. And so the idea, I mean, what you're describing is not is like a mental choice to not fight the darkness that is going to show up. And then I love what you just said, like, let's redecorate the pain cave. We'll make it a fun place to be. And so that's a mindset shift, right? I mean, that's a totally different way to approach it. That's super helpful to me. And I don't do anything near as long as what you're doing, but everybody gets to a spot where you're like, I think I'm done. I think that's all I got. And so having tools that you're ready to engage with is really cool. So you're doing that in different places than maybe some of the other people that I've interviewed. But so I meant to say this earlier too, like you had an unfair advantage with triathlon because you were a swimmer, and swimming is usually the hardest part of the whole thing. And so to be able to get out of the water not wiped, because I assume you knew how to do it efficiently and still fast, but without like emptying the tank. And I knew enough swimming when I was doing triathlons. I knew enough how to swim. I was better than the majority of the people that were doing, but not near as good as the people that had swam for a long time. So I still got out of the water like, oh my gosh, that was unreal. I think I'm okay. And that got better the more I swam. But I think I have a friend, I've interviewed him a couple times on here, Van Fletcher, that he's in his 50s now, and he's competing in Ironman 70.3 World Championships around the world, and he's doing Ultraman, and
Nice.
He's always been a really, really good swimmer, and that puts him at the lead pack coming out of the water. And so it doesn't surprise me that you did really well with triathlon, being with swimming in the background. But it doesn't sound like what you're doing now has all that much to do with swimming, other than the Sweden thing that you mentioned. Is swimming kind of done for you, or
I did that I went out there 3 years. I mean, it was definitely a North Star, the last couple of years. My wife and I both went. So my wife was the navigator on the boat, and so it was her responsibility to pick the route. Every year they move the checkpoints to different islands, so you have to be very strategic, and then, the fueling and stuff. But no, we're not going this year. And so I haven't been swimming as much. Periodically, I did take a short hiatus after I stopped doing triathlon and was cycling more. It's always there. I love I love swimming. It feels so good to be in the water. I think naturally we are all in a womb at some point surrounded by fluids. So there's something very primal about it. And yes, it is you hit the nail on the head. It is very technique focused. Like you can go out and ride your bike or run every day for a few months and like you'll get better, you'll get more efficient, but you might go out every day and swim for 2 months. And like, if you don't have maybe somebody to help you, like with your technique, I mean, I guess I would equate it to my golf swing, like I can go out and swing a ton, but like hit some golf balls.
This thing is not getting better.
Yes. So you really have to have sort of a feel for the water, and that does take a little while. But swimming is one of those sports where you're alone with yourself, it's like, and you said I do long distance, I also feel like this is so relative because in a lot of ways, like going out for 3 or 4 days or whatever, like the only thing I've done, I did a 12-hour nighttime run, as many laps as you can do up this trail in Santa Cruz. That was kind of a just grassroots adventure with a buddy of mine. And then there's a local 24-hour adventure race every year that happens in February. But like, some people would say, well, you went for 24 hours, and I'm like, yeah, but again, like, people are out doing adventures that are weeks and months and years long. So it is all relative. I always have that perspective of like, and some days I wake up and go, man, I can't believe I did something. I finished the Tour Divide in 2023 and like, I can't believe I went for 16 days straight, like hard every day. Like,
what is that race? Tell me more about that.
I still shock myself sometimes on that. That is probably one of the bigger bikepacking races. It is, and race is a very loose term, but it starts in Banff and it finishes at the Mexico border. So it's 2,700 miles, and 90% of it is gravel roads, and you're riding through the Continental Divide, basically a whole bunch, ton of climbing, but mostly all rideable, very different from like, I've done the Arizona Trail and Colorado Trail, and there's a ton of hike-a-bike on those. You're just like pushing your bike up really steep stuff, where Tour Divide is a lot of rideable stuff. But, you're on your bike for, I don't know, 16, 18 hours a day. And, there's some stop time in there for a quick, but it's like, it doesn't feel like you're stopping. You're like frantically running around the gas station, filling your pockets. And then you're like back on your bike, eating, stuffing your face. And then you just tip over at midnight and fall asleep in, a porta potty or something for, not a porta potty, but I did a couple of concrete pit toilets in bear territory in Montana, but so, and then you fall asleep and then you wake up and you do it again. And then you and then you finish and you're like, whoa, what have I done? Like, I actually, for a couple weeks, I woke up and I was like, oh, you're going to get on my bike, and then you're like, no, I finished. Like, you're just feeling of like, whoa, like I did something really hard. And then you look back on it, and you're like, I'm still surprised that I was able to do something of that magnitude.
But do you also look back on it and go, yeah, I could have gone a little farther?
You mentioned this earlier, Josh, and you talk about sort of this like battle we have within ourselves and how do we know how hard to push? And so in some ways it's easier to have a defined finish line. Like, this is where the adventure ends, because even if you don't know how long it's going to take you to get there, you like are going for something, where there's all kinds of explorers and adventurers out there who like, they don't know when it's going to be over. And that part of it to me is like, you're hiking to the, I don't know, North Pole, and you're like, I've got enough stuff for weeks. Like, this could last forever. I mean, every day I was making forward progress. And so I had a pretty rough idea, like where I was going to get to that day. Like, I'm making forward progress, where there's a lot of expeditions where like you're just like, and to me that is like the real, like those backyard ultras where you're just going and going and going and going, and it's kind of dependent upon somebody else. And when they're like, that is the adventure that we're all on, right? Like, we don't know how many more days we have here. And so we're just constantly trying to make the most every day. And we have how we've treated others at the end of the day, and the connections that we've made that you're sort of, sharing. That's what we have to show for ourselves at the end of the day. And so, yeah, adventure is like, it's everywhere.
Yeah. And you've said this a few times, but talk to me a little bit about your experience with adventuring with other people. So it sounds like you and your wife and daughter have built that into part of what your family does, what it means to be your family. But what have relationships look like in other things? Because a lot of times these ultra events can seem like very selfish endeavors, but I hear it over and over again that, like, man, one of the best things about this are the people that I get to meet. Like, I see them all the time. That we're all cut from the same cloth, and we didn't know that. And so tell me a little bit more about your experience of adventuring with other people.
Yeah. Well, after I graduated, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I was coaching swimming, and I was like leading these canoe trips. And then I like came back and I did a short little stint in grad school. And then I decided, to get this job at this science camp. I meet my now wife, and she went to a NOLS program, National Outdoor Leadership School. And so I invite her on a backpacking trip, and we're up in Desolation Wilderness, and we get to the top. Yeah. We get to the top of Dick's Pass, and there's somebody on their cell phone, and we're like, hey, like, and he finishes and he's like, hey, I'm really sorry. I'm on the Pacific Crest Trail, and I just got a chance to call my girlfriend, And my wife's like, what? And I had actually had it in the back of my mind. I was an Eagle Scout, so I grew up around that area and had done some hiking on the PCT and kind of kicked it around, was like, oh, this would be an awesome adventure. And so 2009, we're out there hiking. My wife, we get back to the car, and we see somebody asking for a ride in town, and she tells the guy, that his name was Freebie. Freebie was his trail name. Tells Freebie, hey, Freebie, we're going to do the Pacific Crest Trail next year. I look over at her and I'm like, dude, I just met this girl 3 months ago, and she's like, we were going to do this Pacific Crest Trail. And so honestly, she brought out a lot of that sense of adventure in me. And I was like,
That's awesome.
Okay, I guess we're doing it, And my mom passed away 2009 to cancer. And it like kind of, I was like, this is a great opportunity for me to just have this connection and go for 5 months. And so we took off, and this is actually a great part of the story is here we are hiking outside of Mount Hood. We had just gotten breakfast at Timberline Lodge, which is one of the like great trail spots, breakfast buffet.
Heard about that.
Yeah. And so we see Freebie on the trail, and we're like, do you remember us? Yes. And he was out there just like for a day hike. And we're like, we're actually doing it. And so, I think that sort of fostered this like, okay, like, but honestly, that renewed my sense of faith in humanity. The trail angels are so amazing. I'm sure you've heard this from all kinds of ultra hikers. And then, we wanted to adventure more together. And so, as I mentioned, we went to South America for 6 months and rode bikes. But, when you're on an adventure, I think you're just so much more open and receptive to being like, all right, if you pull into a gas station in a car, usually you don't go, hey man, where are you headed? Like, what you up to? But if you're on a bike, people come to you and they go, where are you coming from? Where are you headed? Like, it just sort of starts the conversation. And, we stayed with so many hospitable people in Latin America. They'd so just invite us to their house and have a barbecue. And, and Roy probably spoke about this with adventure racing is, you have to be real tight with your team. And you've got 4 people, you're putting a lot of trust into them and communication and really being vulnerable and like, man, I'm having a hard time right now. I need somebody to like lift me through this dark moment. And it is easier when you have people around you. But I do think adventure, when you have that mentality of like, okay, like this is where we're at and we're kind of open to it. I feel like the universe just gives you some really cool like curveballs and yeah, it brings people to the table that you're like, this is so fun. So we still tell stories about, getting a ride with some guy driving a big septic truck down in Southern California, and he just wanted to tell us for an hour, or driving back after a trail town resupply. And we're like, the people you meet, like who leave those little footprints in the sand on your heart, you're like, man, that was a special time. But
yeah, somebody you may never, ever cross path with in the future, but that you'll never forget. I mean, that's so 100%. Cool. Yeah. And it just occurred to me that I see this podcast in a lot of the same light, like 70 plus interviews at this point, most of which are people, including yourself. I don't know that you and I would have ever met, right? Except for knowing someone that knew Roy Malone, that introduced me to you, right? And it just weaves such a more interesting story to life to have these kind of, like you put it, the universe just puts it together. But you have to put yourself out there. Like you have to go do this thing that is really hard and vulnerable and need a ride in a septic truck or from Freebie. So in a lot of the same ways that you described getting to the benefit of the suffering, like you got to get through the hard part to get to the good stuff. I think you're describing a lot of the same thing with your faith in humanity is that you had to put yourself out there doing these things and risk that you don't get it back in return or that it doesn't go well. And in fact, it's kind of risky. I don't know if you seem to be a bit extroverted. I'm a pretty committed introvert most of the time. And so like going and jumping in the middle of the group, I'm like, yeah, I think I'll just read a book, but anytime, like I still say that as a very committed introvert, the things that have been most important in my life have always involved other people, always. Mm-hmm. And even with adventures, the adventures that I've done, there's a lot of things I've done on my own. I don't really remember the details of those, but the things that I've done with other people have just a different kind of mile marker in my memory. It sounds like you would agree with that. Like your experience has been something similar.
Absolutely. I mean, bike packing is a fairly solitary experience, if you're just kind of out there in the middle of the night, but there are people around you or the people that you come across at a stop. It can absolutely transform the experience, just completely heighten it. And it's always for better. But I guess I would ask you, Josh, like what comes online when you're in those moments of feeling like, oh man, like end of a long day, like I don't know if I want to have a social conversation with, I don't know, the mailman right now. But when you do, it's like you always, I don't know, do you feel like there's always something that comes out of it that is worthwhile of that initial speed bump to get the activation energy required?
I would say, and being totally honest, not always. There's enough of the not always that make me go, yeah, I think I might not have this conversation right now, but those are probably very small occurrences.
Sure.
And that really, as an introvert, I still love interesting conversations, whether it's with my wife or my kids or a stranger. That, as you've already described it so well, like it just weaves a different fabric into life. That if I let that introvert like have its way, I'd be looking at some beautiful scenery in the middle of the woods in Alaska, and I'd be probably miserable and lonely, And so it has to happen. And I think in a lot of ways you're describing the intentionality that has to precede the good stuff. But so because my brain works this way too, of thinking of the negative as much as the positive, have there been instances where you have been doing one thing or another and the experience with somebody else wasn't ideal, or that it went sideways?
Well, that's funny that you say that, because I do perceive the glass as half full very often. And there are plenty of moments, and I'm sure all the thru hikers that you've had on here would say that, you end up in a town and you're exhausted, or all you want to do is like sit and enjoy your food in peace. And then people want to hear your story, or then you have to kind of entertain the crowd, or like, and my wife is very much you, Josh, like,
Is that right?
At the end of the day, I don't have the bandwidth. I don't need to like engage. I like the social, to have a conversation just to have a conversation is not needed. So, but one thing you mentioned at the start of before we got online was the word curiosity. Yeah, you're curious, and I sense that so much, and it's something that I really, I try and bring out in my students. I try and bring out in my daughter. I really try and bring out in myself, because I think at the end of the day, it is 100% what drives me. I'm curious about, what kinds of things I will experience, what kind of feelings I'm going to have, what kind of things I'm going to see. I mean, that's one reason I love to go on adventures, is like, what am I going to, and so that curiosity 100% propels me forward. And I think in having those conversations and being curious from others, it's because I want to know, like, what kind of things did you see and experience? And like, can I get that same experience? And I think we're just kind of driven to create those opportunities for us. And when you have that curiosity, it certainly is like pouring a little fuel on the fire
So I think you're answering my question in a way of, even if there have been interactions that have gone sideways, because of your curiosity, it's still, you still turn it into it can be a positive experience, or a positive takeaway. Is that true, or have you had?
Yeah, that was a long answer. Yes, for the most part. I can think of a few moments for sure where I'm like, oh man, I got myself into this situation, and like, oh, like, there's other things that I maybe would have rather done with my time than endured this, whatever, long-winded, some sort of debate or something. But really, I do feel like I try and hold the perspective of like, it's part of the journey. And with everything, there are those moments where like, you endure because it's, I don't know, maybe sometimes I'm too like socially polite and try to like, not be the person who's like, actually, I'm not really in the mood for this right now. But I try to be respectful and hold that, because I guess I also try to take the other perspective of like, when you're out there, for example, okay, I'm riding bikes with somebody and you're 4 days into the ride and you maybe need just a moment to like sit with your own thoughts and kind of like in your head prep, okay, I'm going to be getting into a town. Like, what are the steps I need to take? Like, I need to fill my bottle. Oh, my back tire feels a little soft. I need to reapply some sunscreen. I like things you can't do while you're on the bike.
Mhm.
And then somebody rides up next to you and they're like, oh, hey, how's your ride going? And you're just like, oh, it's good. And then like they start, they're excited. They just caught up to you and they want to like engage in some conversation and you're kind of like, I just got caught up with and like I just want to like think about how to keep moving forward in this.
Yeah.
I'm in a low spot. So, I guess, those are examples maybe where you're like, oh man, like what do I need to do, to kind of like be okay with this?
Yeah. I mean, I think we've spent a lot of time with this in talking through the mental side, the mental challenges, the mental game, the strategies, the mental fortitude that you have to do these types of hard things. I am curious though, where does that, let me think how to ask this. Ultimately, what I'm trying to ask you is, are there moments where you switch to intuitiveness, that a gut feeling or something less solid to make decisions when you're in the middle of an adventure? And how do you do that? How do you decide when I need to stick to the map, or I need to ask for help from this person, or now this person doesn't feel safe, I'm going to keep moving on, or this isn't the right place to stop, I need to find somewhere else?
Oh, this is good actually, because I'm sure probably Roy brought this up. Roy's an amazing navigator. So navigation is fairly new. I mentioned I was an Eagle Scout, but I didn't do a lot of like map and compass work, orienteering. And so it wasn't until I was getting ready to go to Fiji 2019. So I'm pretty new to this. There's a lot of people who've been orienteering their whole life. It's a sport in Scandinavia, right? The kids grow up in elementary school orienteering. Orienteering is an amazing just blend of reading the lay of the land and trusting your head because you've got the skill, you've got a paper map in front of you, but also trusting that intuition of like, am I like, am I where I think I am? Like, does my body feel like I've actually gone 200 meters? Did I actually descend a re-entrant, and am I on a spur? It's like you're feeling the map in real time. So there's so much of that, having to like trust that. And then when you're with somebody else on a team and they ask you a question like, well, are you sure? And then you got to like you're kind of going back and forth between my head and my gut and like my heart, like, because you don't want to let your team down. And so I guess I bring that up to say, this happens so frequently when you're outside, of having to kind of shift between like the why is like this gut feeling, and it's very primal of like, sometimes it's survival. Like, I've got to get through the night, or I've got to get to this place because I'm running low on calories, or I'm down to my last bottle of water. And like, if I would love to stop and sleep, but like I know that like, boy, if I rest my body, like, and then I wake up and I've only got a couple of sips, like I should, but anyways, yeah, I think there is a tug of war that happens within us all the time of that. And trusting that gut feeling is, something that takes practice. And unfortunately it takes moments where you felt it and you didn't trust it. And you're like, I can push a little further. And then you're like,
You should have done that.
A really bad call.
Yeah. So that is something that is very interesting to me, is I guess you call it a sixth sense, but it's a tuning into something else that is happening outside of, outside the physical realm. And are you able to use what's innate in all of us to recognize that? And I love what you just said, that it's kind of like a muscle that I think some people are innately able to recognize those kinds of things easier. But I think for anybody, you have to develop it, and you develop it through the experience of doing and probably failing or missing it and learning from that. And, I'm very much a logic thinker. And so that piece does not come natural to me. So it is something I'm always interested to see how other people do that. And I would venture to bet those instances for you are probably when you've pushed past what you thought was the end. Like you get to, as you said earlier, the good stuff, and then there's something else that switches on in your brain or soul or whatever it is that taps into that. I think you have to have the skis. You have to be out over the skis a little bit to get there. Is that true for you, or would you disagree with that in any way?
No, 100%. And I can think of some very specific moments where I have been open to that. Like, all right, like help me through this. Like I need something, give me a little something here because
Mm-hmm.
I'm like my tank is on complete empty and I've got something really hard in front of me and I need a little bit of like a little extra and our yeah, our bubble finds a way, you know. I think
Mm-hmm.
the universe like it yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah. Well, let me kind of bring us to an endpoint, but there's a couple things I want to ask you about how you do this. Because, I mentioned this earlier. My day job is a financial planner. I work with very normal people doing very, very normal things, but that are still trying to push themselves into living their great life right now and being on adventure in the things that they're doing. But having a family and doing that is a challenge. There's only 24 hours in a day. You've got a full-time job. You've got a family that needs your involvement and attention when you're not at work. What does training or even doing these types of things look like for you at this point in your life? How do you integrate all of that?
It's a delicate balancing act. I think that I've been real fortunate to have I mean, not real fortunate, like all fortunate to have my wife on board and be supportive. And it is a challenge for sure. I think daughter's getting a little bit older. It's getting a little bit easier. We bring her on a lot of adventures, summer travels and backpacking trips and whatnot. But I get up early. I've mentioned swimmer in college, kind of old habits die hard. I wake up early. A lot of my like fitness happens before my wife and daughter wake up. And then we got a little dad's group here in town, a little adventure club. So one night a week we try and get out after the kids have gone to bed and go late in the dark, and that's always
Oh,
kind
that's
of
cool.
fun.
What kind of stuff do
Yeah,
you do?
we a buddy of mine designed like a little app where we got like a map run course, or we'll do a bike ride or a paddle or something like that, some sort of something physical, but also just bring some guys together and have a little adventure in the dark.
Great
Um,
idea.
and then, weekends, usually we kind of split. My wife will do something one morning and I'll do something another morning. And I try and go a little longer on the weekends if I can. But I don't have anything necessarily on the calendar. There's a couple things I'm going to do end of summer and into the early fall. And they'll require a bit more hours. And then it's just, finding a way to kind of fit that into the week.
Yeah.
Something's got to give. And my wife is, like I said, she's super helpful and we'll kind of pick up the slack where we can. But we kind of trade adventures too. I'm sure you've heard
Okay.
she
Yeah.
gets
Yeah.
her time to do her adventure. I
Yeah.
get my time to do my adventure. But
And it sounds like you guys do a fair amount of adventuring together also.
we do, yeah, we do. I mean, we're heading this weekend. We're going up to Yosemite. Got some backpacking
Oh, cool.
permits for the 3 day, and then we're gonna go. We're gonna go to the Alps and the Dolomites this summer. We're really looking forward to
Oh,
that. A
jealous.
little adventure. First time
Yeah.
out there, so I don't even know what to expect. But yeah, it's fun. My wife also is a teacher, so we feel really fortunate that we can enjoy summers with our daughter and really get to connect and spend some time
Are
doing what we enjoy.
for educators, is summer the time to really kind of go all in on doing this kind of stuff?
June and July, yeah, we're out the end of next week, and then we're back the first week of August. So June and July is really kind of our time. We'll do some adventuring, and I mean we do it all year long. We're in California.
Yeah.
We're really fortunate, It's sadly it doesn't rain that much this last year, but I think El Nino is coming, so we're going to get some wet weather. But yeah, when we can, we try every month to at least get one weekend out, going out and doing something as a family. And I definitely get the itch. We were talking about this before, how when you've accomplished something and you're kind of like, what's my next direction to sail to? Where's the next island to sail towards? And then, that sort of requires some navigation for sure, but putting something on the calendar that's long and hard and scares you. I feel like I tell my students this all the time, do something that really scares you. It's not that often we get that many surprises. And I do feel that's a genuine surprise of like, what is going to happen when I'm in this moment that I like was really nervous about, and like, how do I show up for that?
That's really cool. What's, if you could boil it down to like a phrase or a sentence of what you want your daughter to grow up with as, I guess you call it a legacy or something, what you want to pass on to her about what adventuring during life means. How would you describe that for what you're trying to instill in her?
Oh man. I mean, the first quote that popped in my head that I really love, and I remember actually the guy you just had on recently talking about the Taco Bell 50K. He said it too, that a ship is safe in its harbor, but that's not what ships were built for. I feel like so the more we get out there and actually like just move towards something that's really like uncomfortable, and it's going to be uncomfortable, but when you're intentional and you're open to this idea that like this is going to hurt a little bit, but in the end, like the next time I do it, it won't hurt as much. And there's a lot of things that and hurt is maybe not the right word to use, right? And even just picking up a guitar, and like I want to learn to play the guitar at 30 years old. Like I was tired of going to campfires and not being able to strum a guitar, and like, okay, I'll just learn a few chords, and like I see a guitar behind you, that's what brought it to me. It's hard, and you're like, my fingers don't work like this, but the more you do it, now it's like, yeah, but now I can like put your fingers on it and you're like, oh, well, that's what a D chord feels like. But yeah, I think we just do hard things because they're worth doing, I guess.
That's a great phrase.
Yeah,
that is a great phrase. So let me ask you a few rapid fire questions here. First of all, are you a reader? Do you like reading books?
Yeah.
You have a favorite?
Oh man, I mean, I love the adventure, like nonfiction tales of great adventures.
Awesome. If you could meet anybody, dead or alive, who would you want to meet?
Oh man, I'd be curious to meet my grandfather, just because I didn't get an opportunity to meet him. He sounds like an inspiring guy, but I guess there's some adventurers that I'd be curious to pick their brains about. Ernest Shackleton or something.
What about your grandfather's past has you interested in that? Obviously,
it was just such a different time. My wife says I'm an old soul, and I guess I think like what kind of decisions people make about how they, chose what they chose and where they chose to be. And, I which is why you're doing this podcast, right? Just sort of asking those questions with curiosity, because there's so many things that show up in me that I'm like, is this my dad? Is this my dad's dad? Like, what's why is this coming on right now?
Yeah, I think anybody that's at all introspective of thoughts and behaviors that we all have, it's a natural tendency to go, okay, where did that come from? Yeah, it might have been nurtured in there over the years, but I am totally a believer that there are multi-generational things that show up. And I had somebody tell me one time, it's kind of like an ocean tanker, that there are these generational behaviors that the tanker gets moving. And it takes somebody to go, you know what? I'm not going to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And then it slowly turns it, but that's how it makes the change for the next generation. Yeah. It takes somebody, and in his words, he said, somebody has to pay twice. So we all pay for our own shortcomings. Yeah. But if the generation before us doesn't pay for theirs, and then we have to pay our own and theirs, and that's where the tanker starts turning.
Fair enough, yeah.
And so I love where you went with that with your granddad, because I'm the same way. Like there are things multi-generations back that, man, I just love one conversation. Let me ask you a few questions. Yeah. That's really cool. So your favorite adventure that you've ever done?
Oh man, I mentioned the PCT. That definitely stands out. That was a time kind of before the the film and the book came out, and so there was a little less hype around it. And my wife and I were young and just excited and eager and open. But honestly, like I also, I just went backpacking in Zion with my daughter and wife for spring break, and it was like actually one of the first real backpacking trips that she was like, this is so fun, Dad. I want to go farther. Like we went to the Narrows and only went in a little bit after we finished our backpacking trip. And Dad, I want to hike the whole thing. So you see that kind of like excitement and hunger inside of a child. And it's like, it's really fun to be a part of.
That's awesome. Worst adventure?
Ooh, oh man. Oh gosh. Okay, the Ozarks. The first year I did the Ozarks race. Oh man, the wheels fell off, Josh. This was 100 hours in and I had not enough sleep. And honestly, it was an out of body experience of me. Like I thought I was in a different state. We got to the finish line. There's footage of me just standing there looking around like, where am I? What have I done? I had just numb. I was past my prime.
Do you hallucinate when you get into these kind of things?
Well, when you're hallucinating, your body's like, okay, like you're seeing stuff. That's because, but at this point, then you're just like, you're past that. I literally was like, it was coming undone. The wheels fell off the bus proper. I mean, it was a great adventure. I learned a lot about myself, but I also learned, I ended up going with a team. I didn't know any of them, and I was kind of a last minute fill in. And so I learned a whole lot, the questions to ask people and their own motivations and kind of the why behind that. But, I wouldn't say I would say it's the worst because that's why I answered it. But I certainly was like, it stands out as something that was like, I don't want to go
different
there.
Than all the other ones.
Yes, I don't want to be in that place again. Like it was scary.
Where in the Ozarks is that race?
Oh, Bentonville.
Oh, yeah, in Arkansas.
Okay. Yeah, somewhere up there.
Yeah. My wife went to school there. Or in Fayetteville, not far from there.
Oh, beautiful. Like the paddling was incredible. Some of the biking was fun. It was hard as can be. Conditions are really tough, but yeah, sleep. But yeah, we need more of it.
The Ozarks and I would say the Appalachian Mountains are similar where they're underappreciated about the ruggedness of the mountains.
Man.
You can definitely get your lunch handed to you if you don't appreciate it enough.
100%.
Yeah. All right. Last one. Do you have a favorite mantra? Something that you tell yourself, whether it's during an adventure or just in general?
I think I spoke to it earlier, just that if you can't get into it or if you can't get out of it, get into it and find a way in this moment to embrace the suck or what you feel like this is not, because, and sometimes it's, you've been handed one card and then you get handed another card and then the rain comes and then, beyond the rain, then the mud starts piling on your tires and you're just like, oh, when is this going to end? And so, find a way to laugh, find a way to find a way, really. That's what it comes down to. I think we are all out there to see what is inside of us. And when you actually get to see it, like I said, sometimes it's a little scary, but that's, that's why we're out there.
Part of the process.
Yeah.
Justin, this is, you passed Roy's bar, so congratulations.
Hey, well, it's been an honor and a pleasure. I did enjoy racing with Roy at World Championships this last October in Canada, and I mean, he's an incredible athlete, and he's so tough, physically, mentally, emotionally, and it's from years of racing. It's from years of doing this. I think the more you're doing this, the more you're putting yourself out there, the more you're finding the joy in doing it. So I applaud you. It's really fun to listen to your work and your legacy that you're leaving. And so I appreciate you giving me a platform to share a little bit of stories and, let my daughter listen to this when she's, my age going, what was Dad talking about?
Well, Justin, I hope our paths cross somewhere. I hope it's not just this one interview. This has been a lot of fun, but I say it after almost every one of these conversations, like, man, all from the same cloth, like different locations, but same people. And it's so fun to have this conversation. And I've certainly learned a lot. But I appreciate you taking the end of probably a long school day and taking the time to have the conversation with a
That's
stranger.
all right. The feeling's mutual. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the On Adventure podcast. Be on the lookout for another episode dropping in a couple weeks. And be sure to go to our YouTube page and subscribe and follow us there, as well as on all the socials from Facebook to Instagram and LinkedIn. Until our next episode, I hope you stay safe and stay on adventure.